Shalom, dear friends here in the US, and good evening to those of you in the UK, Greece, and Cyprus. My name is Elena Karmokolias. I'm a member of the board of the Hellenic Society Prometheus, and I'm delighted to be part of tonight's program. With us is a distinguished group of professionals who will talk about a new film project based on the life of Daphnis Panagides, an extraordinary man who started as a freedom fighter in Cyprus and moved on to become a humanitarian and a champion of environmental sustainability. The driving force behind this project, the spiritual father, if you will, is Takis Panagides, a long-standing friend of Prometheus and Daphnis' brother. Takis, who is with us today, watching us, he would be delighted, he would love to talk to you, but unfortunately, due to Parkinson's disease, which has affected his speech, he will not be able to speak, but his nephew Thalis will be speaking on his behalf. When Takis approached Prometheus to sponsor tonight's event, we gladly accepted, not only because we found Daphnis' story compelling, but we were also impressed by the enthusiasm and the caliber of the team behind this project, who are our guests tonight. We were also excited about the prospect of the film being shot in Greece and Cyprus, thus promoting the country's policy to become destinations of international film productions. We're looking forward to your comments and questions, which you can enter in the chat box during or after the presentation. And without any further delay, let me introduce tonight's guests. Mr. Yannis Petridis, a Harvard Business School graduate with multi-industry operating and board experience in private equity businesses. He is currently serving as senior industry advisor at the Triton private equity investment firm, and he also served as president of PepsiCo's European division, as well as chairman of Refresco, one of the world's largest beverage companies. Mr. Kostas Seris, an internationally acclaimed film director who, besides cinema, he has also been active in theater, television, writing, music, and journalism. He has collaborated with Nikos Koundouros and the French director Jean-Daniel Paulet, among others, and his 1983 film Rebetiko, for which he was the producer, director, and screenwriter, won the Silver Bear at the 34th Berlin International Film Festival. Mr. Thalis Panagides is a published author and entrepreneur. He is Daphnis' son and is joining us from Limassol to read Takis' message. Hello, Thalis. Our fourth guest is Mr. Petros Petridis, a graduate of the University of Toronto, who is also joining us from Limassol. He is former chairman of the board and executive director at London Greek Radio and is fundraising director for the film project. Good evening, gentlemen. It's a pleasure to welcome you to Prometheus. Now let's start with Yannis Petridis.
Thank you, Elena, and a very good morning, a very good afternoon, and a very good evening to all of you who are watching. We have people joining us from various time zones in the world. This is a truly international meeting, and it's a delight to be with all of you. My name is Yannis Petridis, and I'm joining you from a very sunny Athens, or at least so it was during the day. Let me first start by thanking the people from Prometheus for helping us to organize this event. We appreciate deeply your time and your efforts, and hopefully you will see that it's all for a good cause. I also wanted to thank all of you, the audience, for joining us today to hear about the very exciting film project that is under development. You have all probably watched at one time during your lives films like Zorba the Greek, Never on Sunday, or Rebetiko. Films that allowed people from across the world to experience the authenticity of Greece. One can argue in many ways that films like this really have put Greece on the map for so many people that never had the chance to actually visit the country. Now, our aim, and I realize that it might sound very ambitious, is to produce a film that can enter that league, the top league. Put simply, we believe that we have a great concept, that we are developing a thrilling film script, and that we have a unique and very talented team in terms of direction and production to create something truly unique. All of this led by Kostas Feris, who is, as you know, internationally acclaimed and has produced a large number of films. What hopefully I will try to communicate over the next 15 minutes is the project scope, our concept, the key people involved, and the key milestones that we have for this very exciting project. And as Elena mentioned, we have what we feel is a truly talented team that will present the different angles of the film today to all of you, including the director of the film that I mentioned earlier, Kostas Feris. So what is the scope of our film? My late uncle, Daphnis Panagides, that Elena talked about in the beginning, wrote a book that was completed just before he passed away a couple of years ago. But I will talk about Daphnis in a minute. Let me take you through, some key highlights of the book. The book is titled Daphnis, which in English translates to, depending on who you ask, oleanders or bitter laurels. And it's all about his life. It's the life of someone who was a key figure in the history of Cyprus in the 50s and in the 60s. A very turbulent time for Cyprus, as you can imagine, during that time, where in the 50s, as many of you know, Cyprus was fighting the rule of against the British, against British colonial rule, and for union with Greece. When Cyprus became independent in 1960, Daphnis was elected as member of parliament that he served for a number of years. So it's all about the life of a man who was engulfed in war and who later became an advocate for peace, for reconciliation, and a huge supporter of nature. Shooting of the film will probably take place in Cyprus and Greece. It's going to be in the English language to allow us to reach a very broad and a very international audience. And interesting to note that this film will not be an autobiography, but rather a film based on the book, based on Daphnis, but with the creative freedom to allow us to produce an exciting and a world-class film. It should be ready for international release sometime towards the end of 2022. Who is Daphnis Panagides? He was born in Limassol in Cyprus in 1929, and he was the son of an enlightened priest. He was involved in the 1950s, as I said, in the War of Independence of Cyprus against British rule, and he was a supporter of the union with Greece, and was a very close associate of General Gribas, who was the leader of the EOKA liberation movement. The struggle for liberation in the 50s was bloody, with casualties on both sides. Daphnis was captured and imprisoned, and he ran the risk of being executed. His brother, Stachys, that Elena introduced earlier, and that many of you know in the US, had also close encounters with the British Army with potentially dire consequences. When Cyprus was declared an independent country in 1960, Daphnis was elected a member of parliament, where he served until 1965, at which time he resigned and he moved to the US to pursue doctorate studies in agricultural economics at Iowa State University, helped by his younger brother, Stachys, who was already in the US. And as Elena mentioned, Stachys is really the heart and the soul of this project. After his US studies, Daphnis returned to Cyprus and was an advocate of reconciliation and peace, and was also involved with a huge number of agricultural and ecological projects. Agriculture and nature, and beehives in particular, were his passion, a sensitivity that he inherited from his parents. It's interesting to note that his father, the priest, gave his 3 children names from the flora of Cyprus: Daphnis, Stachys, and Chloe, which, as you can imagine, was quite radical for that time and age. Next, you can see some photos of Daphnis with various key actors of the Cyprus drama in the 50s and the 60s. Here you can see, in the center, you can see General Grivas, who was the leader of the Oka movement. On the left, as you're looking at the screen, is Glafkos Cleridis, who was the president of the Cyprus parliament and later became president of the republic. And on the left of the screen, as you see it, you can see Daphnis. Here you can see Daphnis in the center. On the left is Glafkos Cleridis, ex-president of the republic. And here you can see Daphnis with the president back then in the 60s and early 70s of Cyprus, with Archbishop Makarios. So much about Daphnis. What I want to mention now is a few things about the production of the movie. As I mentioned, the film embraces Daphnis's life and experience between violence in the 1950s and peace once Cyprus became an independent state in 1960. The title of the film is under review. We're looking at a different number of titles. We haven't decided yet. Just to mention a few: Bitter Laurels is one, Aphrodite's Lament is another one, Cyprus, an Island in the Storm, or The Price of Freedom. And shortly we should be able to decide on the title. During the pre-production phase, which will take place in 2021, we will be contacting a list of world-class actors. Tom Hanks is an example of someone that we have in mind and we would like to talk to. And we feel that the actors will be attracted by the symbolism of the film. And of course, we plan to approach actors that are in line, whose values are in line with what we are trying to project in the film. Now, let me spend a couple of minutes on the key talent that is involved in this particular project. As I mentioned, the idea of the film came from Stachys Panagides, the brother of Daphnis, who is an ex-senior executive of the World Bank and lives in Washington, and someone who has dedicated his life for the public good. Perhaps it was his brother Daphnis that really pollinated Stachys with the idea of contributing to the welfare of people in countries where he worked in a different number of capacities in different development programs across the world. As of late, as you know, and as Elena mentioned, Stachys has a problem speaking as a result of Parkinson's, but his mind, I can tell you, is as sharp as ever, and he's tirelessly working to make this film a reality. The director of the film is the renowned Kostas Feris, but more on Kostas in a minute. We are also assisted in this venture by Dimis Michailidis, who is an author, a public speaker on creative leadership, also by the son of Daphnis, Thalis Panagides, who will talk later on behalf of Stachys. And lastly, Petros Petridis, who heads our funding efforts. Now, as far as myself is concerned, my job is really one of coordinating all the different aspects of the project to ensure that we meet our goals. I guess in the language of Hollywood, they call it executive producer. Now, I have to say that I have nothing to do with Hollywood. My career has been in executive management, and the closest I came to producing a film was when I was with PepsiCo, and I was involved in the production of a number of advertising campaigns back then, and I'm talking about the 80s and the 90s, music marketing campaigns, where back then we worked with people like Madonna, Tina Turner, Michael Jackson, Lionel Richie, and others. But that's as far as my film capacities go. Faced with the amazing life and the work of Daphnis Panagides, I am approaching this project with a tremendous amount of humility, but also with a tremendous amount of determination and passion and faith to make this project work. And of course, we always have Kostas Feris to guide us through, all the intricate stuff relating to the film production. And I have to say that I'm fortunate and honored to be working with such a talented group of people. Now, why is this project, why is this film important? We believe that this film has absolutely universal relevance because it shows how an individual who's been engulfed by violence and war becomes a voice for reconciliation and peace. We have so many great and famous examples across the world of this theme. Nelson Mandela, Mahatma Gandhi, and so many others. But in this case, it's all about our world. It's about Hellenism, and it will shed light into two absolutely transformative decades in the history of Cyprus and Greece, from 1954 to 1974. Under the creative leadership of Kostas Feris, we feel confident we can produce something that will be truly special and with international appeal. And we plan to be contacting, as I mentioned earlier, world-class actors to take part in this project. And if we are successful, and we will be successful, this will have immense benefits for Cyprus and Greece, contributing to a much better understanding of our history, as well as showcasing the beauties of our motherlands. Let me now take you through the key dates that we see. As I mentioned earlier, the pre-production will happen, COVID permitting, in 2021. This is when we finish the script, we look at locations, we choose the actors, and production will take place in 2022 with an international release, we estimate towards the end of 2022. What I want to do next is tell you a few things about Kostas Feris, given that he's such a central part of our project. Kostas was born in Alexandria and is a prolific writer, an actor, and an internationally acclaimed film director and producer. He has produced a great number of films. He's a member of the European Film Academy, and he has won many awards during his career. Many of you will probably have seen Rebetiko, probably the crown jewel of his film portfolio. Kostas will talk about the project in a minute, but before he does, I want to share with you a couple of photographs and also a video that tells you just a little bit more about Kostas Feris. These are posters from Rebetiko, probably his most famous movie. And next, and I will ask the people in Washington to air the video that really gives you a flavor and a glimpse of what Kostas has done over the last many decades.
Natos, o Lorenzatos. O Lorenzatos.
όψες του Θωμά. Να σου παίξω μπαγλαμά, να κατέβουν οι αγγέλοι, να χορέψουν τσιφτετέλοι. Να κατέβουν οι αγγέλοι, να χορέψουν τσιφτετέλοι. Κι αν μερακλωθείς πολύ και σ' αρέσει το βιολί, κι αν μερακλωθείς πολύ και σ' αρέσει το βιολί.
Great. Dear Costa, before I pass the floor on to you, just want to thank you for all your creative efforts and your commitment to this film movie. And the floor is all yours. Over to Kostas.
I have to thank you, everybody, all of you, really, because it's one of the most emotional moments for me to start working in a film that I have the passion of being involved in many, many, many ways. First of all, I was born in Cairo, not Alexandria, Egypt, and raised 22 years ago. And I was of Cypriot origin. And my father comes from the branch of Panagides. We are relatives. I belong to the Panagides family, and I'm proud of it. So at this moment, where the president of Egypt, Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, is congratulated for his intervention to the Gaza Strip and Israel, and trying to bring peace between Palestinians and Israel. I think it's such a film who praises for peace, freedom and peace, because freedom cannot reach without peace, and peace cannot exist with no freedom. They are linked together. That's why peace is the goal, is the aim for everybody, because all around the world we see troubles today that are maybe worse than the troubles that had Cyprus during the hot years of the independence war. Anyway, the subject of the film is not a simple biography. It's an exemplary film with passion for freedom, for peace, and for happiness. Happiness would be the first goal of any constitution in the world, especially at our period, at our time, where the things are really difficult from all the points of view. This film could be really the how you could say it, this spinthiras, or
the sparkle.
Yes, for changing the minds and the feelings of people, because we want to find out again our feelings, our human feelings. We are humans. We are not beasts. So Daphnis Panagides found himself alone in the middle of a turmoil. And that was tragic for him because he was a fighter for freedom, but he suffered from the violence around him. And then he went to the politics and found himself again alone, fighting for peace this time, not only for freedom. That is why, more than a hero, Daphnis was a tragical person. That is the emotional point of the film, and that's what I'll try to put in view. As about the form of the film, I think it says we can also praise Never on Sunday and Zorba and all other films, but the style of this film, in a way, makes us remember by the use of newsreels in a poetical narration. We could refer to the films of Oliver Stone. That's one example. The other example that is difficult to make with a low budget film, but it's possible, really possible, is the film Schindler's List by Spielberg. Those two films, those two directors are really pointing to me the way to make this film and make this film original, emotional, international, with very, very strong impact and also actual, very, very actual. I don't know what I have to say more, but really I am very, very happy to start this project. I could answer to any question if you want, but I don't know. It's up to you.
I think we'll leave the questions for the end. So I think next we have Thalis, who is the son of Daphnis. I will say a few words on behalf of Stachys.
Hi, everybody. First of all, thanks for tuning in. I am Daphnis' son, and Stachys isn't just my beloved uncle, but my gombaros too, my best man. And as you know, Stachys has Parkinson's, which makes speaking difficult for him. So he asked me to share some stories with you about his brother. I begin. Daphnis was 8 years older than me. He wasn't just a brother, but like a father and best friend. Our family's participation in the Cyprus struggle against colonial rule in 55-59 brought us closer together. Daphnis would often send me on dangerous secret missions, like the time I had to transport bombs that were hidden in a vegetable cart tied to my bicycle. Had I been arrested, I would have been executed. Thanks to Daphnis, I left Cyprus in September of 1956 with a scholarship to study in the United States. Years later, I realized that Daphnis' initiatives were an attempt to save his brother from the dangers our family was facing. In his book, Pikrodaphnis, Bitter Laurel Leaves, Daphnis describes some of the events that took place during the struggle against colonial rule. For instance, he mentions the day 100 English soldiers assisted by Turkish auxiliary police surrounded our house and began an intensive search to find General Rivas, the leader of the struggle. At one point, a policeman spotted a partially buried electrical cord. It was the power cord that led to Grivas's hideout. The policeman began digging it up, slowly approaching the hideout of General Grivas. When he was just a few feet away from the hideout, our mother, Maria, rushed out of the kitchen and grabbed the auxiliary by his jacket, as if to protect him, and said, "Son, you're ruining our lights, and you could be electrocuted." At that moment, as if by some divine intervention, the English officer in charge declared the search as over. Had the search succeeded, the struggle for Cyprus's independence could have been over, and my younger brother and I would have been sentenced to death. Years later, as a member of the Cyprus parliament, Daphnis visited the States on an official trip. He visited my wife, Joy, and I when I was close to finishing my doctoral studies at Iowa State in Ames. One day, while touring the campus together, Daphnis turned to me and said, "This is a good opportunity to attend university, because when I was supposed to attend university, I was the guest of Queen Elizabeth at the detention center of Gokino Trimithia." Daphnis studied agriculture at Iowa State University, and a few years later was offered an attractive position to become the general manager of a large plantation. Stachys goes on to share a few more memories of Daphnis in the States. He writes, "The first one involves a phone call I received from Daphnis when I was in Brazil. He called from Ames, where he was still a student, to get some information about Brazil for a friend. Of course, in those days, phone calls were very expensive. I asked Daphnis, why so much effort to help this gentleman? After a short pause, he replied, "He's English, you know, we must help him." Daphnis held no bitterness against the English who had tortured and imprisoned him for 3 years, and preferred instead to remain true to the biblical calling: love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. At this point, Stachys also wanted to mention that I was born in Ames, Iowa. So you can call me the Americanagi of the family, and probably why you can detect a little bit of an American accent here. So I go on. Stachys goes on to share another memorable incident that happened in 1974 when Daphnis was visiting Washington, D.C. He writes, on his way back to Cyprus, shortly after the Turkish invasion, Daphnis met with Harold Hughes, then the governor of Iowa and late senator. When the governor saw Daphnis, he embraced him, and together they kneeled down on K Street, praying for Cyprus. This was my brother and best friend, Daphnis Panagides. May his memory be eternal. Eonia tu imnimi. So this concludes my segment, and I pass it on to Petros Petridis, who will talk a little bit about the fundraising. Thank you, everybody.
Hi, everybody. As explained, with the guidance of Kostas Feris, Yannis Petridis, and the rest of the group, our aim is to create a successful film that will attract worldwide viewers while promoting the Greek spirit of Daphnis Panagides. The cost of the film is estimated at 2 million euros, about $2.4 million below the line, because there are participants such as famous actors and artists who will participate above the line of the budget. We are confident we can secure this from governments and institutions that support history and education, such as the Cyprus Ministry of Education and Culture, the Hellenic Film Theatre Center, the Centre National du Cinéma in France, Eurimages, the Cultural Support Fund of the European Council, individual and institutional investors, and more. However, before we reach the film production phase, it is the pre-production stage which is of critical importance. To be able to approach governments and institutions and investors, we first have to produce a credible professional presentation. To this end, we estimate that an amount of about 45,000 euro, about 53,000 US dollars, is needed for research, script writing, travels to Greece, Cyprus, USA, to identify people, sites and studios, plan the production, etc. We have already received donations of about 13,000 euros and are asking our worldwide friends to support us and join us in this dream. You can make your contributions for the pre-production phase by PayPal or direct bank transfer to the accounts shown on your screen. Thank you for your support.
Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen, for your presentations, and listening to you, it's easy to see how passionate you are about this project, about your dream, as Petros said. Daphnis' story is moving and inspirational and needs to be told because it sends a positive and hopeful message, so much needed in our time. I wish you good luck in this endeavor of yours, and I look forward to seeing the film on the big screen. We have a few questions from the audience, but I'd like to start with one of my own, if I may. My question is whether the film is going to take any political positions.
Let me, Elena, let me try and answer that. Absolutely not. The film is going to be absolutely non-political. The whole idea is that we communicate the passion of Daphnis for peace and reconciliation. So whilst the idea is that obviously we show the facts and what happened in the 50s and in the 60s as facts, the film will absolutely take no political position.
Thank you, Yanni, for this. Now, another person asked, how confident are you about the project, the projected cost of the film, and how will it be funded?
There are many ways to fund a film. First of all, we have the two countries that can contribute with part of financing, Cyprus and Greece, because we have state funds, very important, just like a COME for the tax, how you call it, anyway, a question with taxes, the Greek Film Center, and in Cyprus, there is a fund about cinema. They finance up to 30% for, time to time, all the good films and the films that has interest for the country, even for the tourism. Then we have the co-producers from other countries, from England, from France, from maybe the Balkan countries. But the ideal would be to have a co-producer from the United States, or even if there is a producer that wants to take it in charge as a whole. There we go to a big budget film, but also we will be very, very happy to have even one distribution agreement with one major company in the United States. If you can have that, the things will be very, very, very easy to finance and to go on. That's the base. And then we have also the unpredictable, sort of a very rich man is enthusiastic about the project and he takes in charge the financing.
Thank you. Thank you, Costa. And you talked about taxes, and another person asked whether the contributions are tax exempt in the US and other jurisdictions, and is it possible to make contributions in other currency, or does it have to be in Europe?
No, I don't think. I think it's going to be an international film. Maybe we have more than 2 or 3 co-producers, and that will guarantee that the distribution will be vast in many, many countries. I forgot to tell you that we have also the Greek television that finances films. And it will be very difficult for them to say no. It's
sorry for interrupting you, Costa. The question was whether the contributions can be made in any other currency other than Euro.
Of course.
Yes, I think the answer
If I
is
may
yes.
answer that.
Of course, of
Okay.
course.
The answer is yes.
Clearly.
Okay. At what stage is the script writing? Tell us a few words about the script writing. Is it ready or?
No, we cannot start the script. We take notes, of course, we make a preparation, but we need, first of all, a vast, what we call it in the cinema and in Hollywood, first of all, this what is called the research. The research is a very difficult process because it's not only a process or a research on historical facts, chronology, timeline of little facts of life, as for instance, the involvement of the students in Cyprus during the war, or the little stories, personal stories, love stories, but this has a chronology, a timeline. Then we have to make a vast research about the period. For instance, what costumes did they wear in 1955, 56, 60, etc. What was the city like, Nicosia? What was the image? It was plenty of lights like today, or it was different? And then on and on and on. This research is the most complicated thing to do before starting really the final version, the final draft of the script.
Of course, that's understandable. Okay, I'm going to have to read this. It's a long question. Have you thought about approaching Greek American actors? And they give some suggestions like Zach Galifianakis, Jennifer Aniston, Tina Fey, Rita Wilson, who is Tom Hanks' wife. And the suggestion is that they could also support financially.
Unfortunately, my good friend, Mrs. Dukakis, has passed away. But of course, we are very, very strongly interested about the Greek American actors that have made just a career. Even with for Tom Hanks, who has Greek nationality from now on, I understand that it will be very difficult to take a leading part because it takes much of time. But I'd like to have Tom Hanks, if he agrees, as a guest star for one only scene the final scene when Daphnis is aged many times after the end of the story, where he receives an award and he gives a speech, a very emotional speech that he looks around and he sees also the faces of the heroes of the period, as Makarios, Grivas, Hutchison, etc., etc. The persons that have been part of his life, and then the audience hears him talking and crying at the same time. That's a very emotional, strong final scene. I'm waiting to see if, for instance, Tom Hanks accepts this part as a, how would you call it, a special part, a small part, but a guest star, as a guest star.
Mm-hmm. It sounds like you have the whole film in your head, Costa. I mean,
I
think it's ready in your head. So
yes, I have it.
I think I know the answer to this question, but I have to ask it because it's been asked. Have you considered making a documentary instead of a full-length feature film on Daphnis?
No, you see, there have been many documentaries, and the best of all was also my friend Markel Kakoyannis Attila. But the audience of the documentary, first of all, is restricted, small audience. Second, the impact of a documentary is very poor in the emotion of people. To have really, to reach emotion to the audience, we need a feature film with a story, with emotions, human beings suffering and triumphing and go on in their life through the difficulties that they have and they reach. That makes everybody in the audience feel like he's in the film, like he resembles either to Daphnis or to somebody else, and makes the film stronger, much stronger than a documentary.
I agree with you 100%. And as I said, I'm looking forward to seeing the film on the big screen. Another question, is there an investment option with a return from the potential film earnings?
That will be known after the establishing of the budget.
Mm-hmm.
According to the budget, we count that with 2 million euros, it will be enough to finish the film, except the below the line, except the above the line, that are very big sums. If we have big stars, we have millions of dollars, but then we have the producer that pays them. But also we have the percentage. All the cost below and above the line will be counted as a whole, and everybody will have his share in percentage to the final cost. That's a long way, a long road to take, but I'm in the cinema as a professional 65 years, and I know very well the tricks and the ways of dealing with all those problems.
That's great. That's great. And another question specifically to you, Costa. The film editing can make or break a movie. Who are you thinking will edit the movie?
You know, I am also an editor, a very good one. I had prizes, awards as an editor. Anyway, the film, to have a good edit, must have a good shooting. The shooting is very important to facilitate the editor to make things happen, to make things alive. Because when you shoot from one part to another from one period of time to another and then jump back again, you have a broken story in pieces. But during shooting, you have to think how they will be
Join the pieces together.
Yeah, exactly. It's σύνδεσμος λέγεται. Ο σύνδεσμος λέγεται...
Association.
Yeah, associations.
Continuity.
To do a good editing, you have to have a good shooting with prediction of the way the things are linked together and the shots. But we have some fantastic editors, even in Greece. I don't know in Cyprus, but in Greece we have Mavropsaridis that had an Oscar nomination. Also a new Lambrinos that has had again an Oscar nomination, and many, many others. And I am one of them, part of them. But of course I need also an editor because a second thought is really a must. You must have a second look to the film to decide which way you go, right, left, or center.
I think someone is interested in whether this film will contribute to local employment because they're asking, will the crew be local? What is the plan for positions such as DOP, lighting, and grip department, art direction, costumes, locations, etc.?
It's a crew. A crew works together with the direction of the director, of course.
Mm-hmm.
And the crew must have an aesthetic view of the film. That's why we have, most of all, an art director. The art director is who decide about the aesthetics of the film, either for costumes or for the sets or even for the lighting. All of that must be linked together and make one thing. We see some wonderful pictures, some wonderful shots. For instance, the famous shot of Schindler's List in black and white, and then you have a red dress, a girl with a red dress running, and it's in a black and white picture. That's an idea of the art director, of course, with collaboration with the director. So we need a good art director, preferably a painter, for instance, to decide together with the director what will be the aesthetics of the film, the colors, the tendencies, etc., etc.
I think the answer, Elena, to add another angle to it is that to the extent that we can shoot in Greece and Cyprus, and I think the incentives are there as of late to produce films in Cyprus and Greece, and there are subsidies, then clearly this is good in terms of giving opportunities to people who are in this area in both of the countries.
Yeah,
so I think that's good news.
Is there a charitable organization involved that can receive funds from a charitable trust, which can only be sent to another charitable organization? I'm a little confused about this, the way it's phrased. I guess they're asking whether there is a charitable organization that they can receive funds on your behalf.
Well, it's something that we probably need to look into. I think it's a good idea because there is actually a charitable trust in Cyprus under the Panagides name that has been in existence for the last many, many decades. I assume the answer, well, I guess it's something that we need to look into. I'm not sure we can give an answer right now, but it's something that's worth looking into.
We're really looking into that. Good idea.
Okay. Are you approaching any public sources for financing in Cyprus, Greece, or the EU or elsewhere?
Well, I think that it's what Kostas covered earlier, the fact that there are a number of organizations in Greece, in Cyprus, and in Europe that can fund part of the project. And in some cases, it could involve as much as 50% of the cost of the production. So yes, the answer is yes. And there are actually a lot of organizations that will help us out on the financial part.
And I think I have one last question, which is how someone is asking, how else can we help this significant project besides financing, such as access to studios and actors?
Well, I think what Kostas mentions to me, but he's probably more qualified than I am to work, is to the extent that there are contacts that we have with some key people in the US who are involved in film production. I think the name of, is it Jim Yiannopoulos, Costa?
Yes,
that you brought up, who is probably the number one, the top guy in the US in Hollywood in film production.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's chairman of one of the biggest studios. So to the extent that there are people that have contacts in Hollywood in film production, I think that would be something that would be incredibly helpful.
I can add that Jim Yiannopoulos has seen Rebetiko, and I know that he liked it. So if we have a contact, I think that he will be interested.
With this last question, we came to the end of tonight's program. On behalf of the Hellenic Society Prometheus, I thank you, Stachi, Anni, Costa, Tali, and Petro for being here tonight. And I'm also saying a big thank you to everyone who tuned in from around the world. I wish you all a good night.